What if your kid ran away in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. with 16 other kids from the same class? You panic and start looking for him, only to find out it was a huge mistake because the people in the town go completely nuts and try to send you packing. What would you do in that situation? This is the story of Weapons, a box office success released in 2025. Today, I'll recap this plot, show how many people got their butts kicked, and give the best tips to beat whatever's terrorizing this town. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date with future horror releases and hit that like button so YouTube recommends this video to more people. The film starts in the quiet town of Maybrook, Pennsylvania. A young girl narrates that 2 years ago, 17 kids ran away from home at exactly the same time, at 2:17 in the morning. The security cameras captured some of them, as the most bizarre part was how they ran, with their arms behind them, almost like they were about to fly.
What?
The next day, Justine arrives at school ready to teach, but when she walks into the classroom, she notices that only Alex showed up. Once the parents realized their kids were missing, the police were notified and started a full search of the town, but they couldn't find anyone. Federal agents joined the case and questioned both Justine and Alex, but neither of them knew what had happened. A month later, we see the parents of the missing kids at a meeting organized by Marcus, the school principal. The problem is, the community is blaming Justine for the kids' disappearance, and it almost leads to a lynch mob situation. The only way Justine thinks she can deal with the tension is by stopping by a liquor store to buy the strongest vodka she can find. A few hours later, Justine is watching TV when she hears a noise outside. At first, she doesn't see anyone, but then someone bangs violently on her door. She grabs some pepper spray and opens the door. She walks out into the street, something I would never do in her situation. First off, she left the door open and turned her back on her house, which means someone could have snuck in, waited for her to fall asleep, and taken her out. Since the entire town is after Justine, she should have gotten herself a weapon for self-defense, especially since the hysteria might lead to some pretty nasty consequences. Thirdly, Justine could have beaten the movie by just leaving town. She's not exactly the most beloved person there. Anyway, Justine doesn't find anyone, but her car probably lost about $5,000 in value because someone spray-painted witch on it. The next day, Justine asks Marcus for permission to go with Alex to his house and ask him some questions along the way. Unfortunately for her, the principal says no, since it would be inappropriate. Plus, the FBI agents had already questioned the kid multiple times, which, according to Marcus, might traumatize Alex, the kid who loves cookies and milk. Later, we find Justine at a bar getting drunk when she meets Paul, a cop in her occasional hookup. Justine asks if Paul's wife knows where he is right now, but Paul says she's away on a business trip. Justine offers him a drink, but he says he'll just stick with a soda. However, he can't resist Justine's little flirtatious move, so he ends up drinking everything and sleeping at her place, if you know what I mean. After school, Justine sees Alex getting on a bus and decides to follow him to his house. The drunken teacher approaches the kid and asks if everything is okay, but Alex tells her to stay away and runs into the house, terrified. Being the mischievous person she is, Justine decides to spy on the property and notices the windows are covered with newspaper. When she peeks through a crack, she sees Alex's parents completely still, like they're playing a game of statues. Another odd thing is that there are several cans of open food on the living room table, which is pretty weird. Justine freaks out and decides to call Marcus. She tells him something's seriously off with Alex's parents and mentions the newspapers covering the windows. Marcus thinks they just want to keep curious people from surrounding their house, but Justine insists that the principal go talk to them. Since Justine's day off isn't going well, guess what she does? Yup, she stops by the liquor store to get even more wasted. Her fun is interrupted by Donna, Paul's wife, who found out about her husband's affair and, in a fit of revenge, throws vodka all over Justine.
Okay, well that's not that bad.
The worst doesn't happen because a store employee grabs Donna, allowing Justine to make her escape. Back home, Justine falls asleep and has a nightmare straight out of A Nightmare on Elm Street. She sees herself at school, and when she enters the classroom, she notices all the students with their heads down. Only Alex is smiling at her, and not in a friendly way. Justine wakes up, but when she looks up, she sees a very ugly woman stuck to the ceiling. She's freaked out, and the creepy figure vanishes. Then Justine comes up with a brilliant idea. She's going to keep an eye on Alex's house. This is the worst plan she could have come up with. Obviously, something was seriously wrong at that house. Justine should have asked Paul to check out the place and interrogate Alex's parents to figure out what was going on with them. Instead, she could have waited in in her car, and if Paul didn't come back from the house, she could have gone to the police station and called for backup to get inside. But nope, Justine decides to nap during her surveillance and misses a crazy woman with scissors leaving the house. Justine somehow manages to get even dumber by not locking her car, which allows the crazy old woman to get in and snip off a piece of her hair without her even noticing. Locking the car would have been a great solution to avoid the events that happened the next day. Not to mention, Justine could have been robbed if some criminal got inside, along with much worse things that could have happened to her, which I won't get into for obvious reasons. Meanwhile, we learn about the story of Archie, one of the parents whose child went missing. Archie misses his son so much that he sleeps in his room. This has driven a wedge between him and his wife, who is dealing with it in her own way. Archer is a contractor, and when he leaves a construction site, we see 2 cans of red paint open, confirming that he was the one who painted Justine's car. The Thanos of an alternate universe shows up at the police station to talk to Captain Ed. Archer explains that he did some digging into Justine's past and found out that she had been arrested for drunk driving and fired from her teaching job at another school she worked at. According to Archer's theory, Justine is to blame for the disappearances, even though Ed disagrees and says there's no evidence to support that. Like Justine, Archer also has a nightmare where he sees Matthew returning home, but the boy is petrified in bed. Archie reveals that he always loved his son, but never had the courage to say it out loud. When Archie finally says, "I love you," he watches as his son transforms into the same terrifying old woman who looks like the Joker after contracting 12 types of hepatitis. He wakes up in a panic and decides to search for his son again. He grabs the city maps and charts possible routes the kids could have taken when they ran away from home. Archie also checks the footage from his home security camera and notices that his son escaped by running with his arms behind him. He then heads to Gary's house, another father who lost his daughter. The interesting part is that Gary is played by Justin Long, who was one of the protagonists of Barbarian, another film that I'm gonna cover someday. This one was directed by Zach Kreger, the same director of Weapons. Back to the movie, we see Archie asking to check Gary's camera footage from the day his daughter went missing. When he watches the recording, he notices that Gary's daughter ran the same way Matthew did. Archie then identifies an area where the children might be, but he doesn't see any location that hasn't already been searched by the police. Returning home, Archie spots Justine filling up her car and decides to have a word with her. Archie is furious with her, but it's not the Thanos-like rage that catches her attention. It's Marcus, who's switched into zombie attack mode and is running toward her the same way the missing boys did. Marcus grabs Justine by the neck, and Archie tries to break up the fight. When Justine manages to free herself, she runs into the liquor store. Archie attempts to knock Marcus out, but the school principal doesn't go down even after taking about 12 punches. Eventually, Marcus gets away from Archie and enters the liquor store. At this moment, Justine could have grabbed a bottle of Jack Daniels and used it to knock out the psycho with a blow to the head. The thick, sturdy glass of these bourbon bottles is strong enough to handle the pressure of the liquid and possible impacts during transport and handling, which is a common feature in quality liquor bottles, both for protection and for a premium feel. This would have allowed Justine to knock him down and escape in her car, but she prefers to try to escape through a locked door, which isn't exactly a great idea.
Pretty good.
Justine gets choked by Marcus and only doesn't follow the light at the end of the tunnel because Archie shoves the principal into the fridge door, allowing Justine to flee in her car. However, this only gives her a few seconds of advantage as the damn Marcus chases her car like he's in peak physical condition. He's followed by Archie in his own car, who realizes that physical fitness isn't everything because knowing the traffic light colors is way more important. Marcus doesn't respect the signals and quickly gets flattened by a car. Archie comforts Justine at the hospital and apologizes for not being an old-fashioned gentleman. He then shows her the city map and she notices the existence of a key location within the perimeter Archie had marked. The movie then shifts to Paul's story. Since the plot isn't linear, I'll do my best to explain everything so you guys can follow. We see Paul patrolling the streets when he spots a young delinquent. Suspecting the kid might be into hard drugs, the cop starts chasing him and eventually, the kid surrenders. We find out the kid's name is James. Paul asks if he has any needles in his pocket since he's going to need to search him. James says no, but that's a lie as a needle pricks Paul's finger. Welcome AIDS. Since the guy with the crazy candy just broke their trust, Paul knocks him out with a punch to the forehead. The problem is, Paul forgot that the dash cam was on and recorded the entire assault. The cop then proposes a deal to James. He'll be set free, but in exchange, the kid has to leave town. James agrees and is released. Paul returns to the police station and talks to the captain in private. He admits to beating James and worries about being sued. The captain, however, says that if James doesn't press charges by the next month, the footage will be erased and the mess swept under the rug. On the other hand, Ed warns that if the kid files a complaint, Paul will have some serious problems ahead. This possibility starts to mess with the cop's head, and when he gets home, things get worse. As Donna returned early from her trip and quickly realizes he was drinking with Justine, the teacher. This is exactly why Paul's wife went after her at the liquor store. The next day, Paul is leaving the police station when he suddenly runs into James, who, upon seeing the punch-happy cop, immediately takes off running. In another flashback, we see the events that led James to go to the police station even after being threatened by Paul. Being a junkie, James needs his candy fix regularly, but he's out of money. This forces him to steal valuable items from cars. After swiping a kid's headphones, he heads to a pawn shop to try to sell the goods. Unfortunately for him, the pawn shop owner doesn't want to buy his junk, forcing James to break into a house to rob it. The problem is, he breaks into Alex's house, the only little boy who hadn't been abducted. Once inside, James steals some silverware, but as he looks back, he sees Alex's parents standing completely still. Since they don't care about material possessions, James ignores them and keeps ransacking the house. When he heads down to the basement, he's shocked to find all the missing kids there, but they're frozen, just like Alex's parents. James goes back upstairs, and that's when he starts being chased by the boys' parents. Desperate, James runs out of the house. He heads back to the pawn shop and tries to sell the silverware, but then he notices a picture frame with photos of the missing kids and a reward of $50,000 for any information that could help the police find them. James then calls the police, hoping to claim the reward, but he's told to go to the station and give a statement. This leads to the encounter with Paul that we saw earlier. James runs off and hides in the woods, but then he runs into the creepy old woman who looks like the Joker, making him run to the tent where he lives. He grabs 3 syringes and waits for the old woman to come in. When the zipper opens, he attacks the crazy lady, only to realize he stabbed Paul, who followed him there.
Oh, no.
The cop doesn't have time for mercy and points his weapon at the guy. Not wanting to become a statistic, James swears he knows where the missing kids are, which convinces Paul to head over to Alex's house. The cop arrests James in the squad car and tells him to wait while he goes inside. The problem is, Paul really messed up this time. What I mean is, if the kids were really there, it would mean the police were dealing with a kidnapping case. Given that, Paul should have asked for backup in case the abducted kids were armed. One more squad car wouldn't hurt the town's security, and could have avoided a lot of bloodshed and potentially beaten the movie. But forget that, because Paul enters the house alone. Several hours pass with no sign of Paul, which leaves James really impatient. Finally, we see the cop leaving the house, but he seems much more aggressive than usual, a lot like Marcus when he attacked Justine. Paul drags James out of the squad car and pulls him into the house. At this point, the plot shifts back to Marcus before the guy seems to get possessed by some kind of rage. We see him talking to Justine on the phone, telling her to stay away from Alex's house, but Justine's concern sets off an alarm for him, so he asks to meet with Alex's parents at the school. Instead of them, it's Gladys, Alex's aunt, who shows up. She's the same terrifying figure who's been haunting Justine, Archer, and James's nightmares.
See you in your dreams.
She tells Marcus that Alex's parents are sick and says she can pass along any messages to them. The problem is, since she's not responsible for Alex, Marcus says he can't talk about the situation. Gladys tries to get some information, causing Marcus to admit that he received a report that Alex might be suffering abuse at home. The crazy old woman asks who made the report, but Marcus refuses to reveal the source. During the conversation, Gladys shows a lot of interest in some of Marcus's ribbons, and then she leaves. The next day, Gladys knocks on Marcus's door and makes up a story about missing the bus to leave town. She's out of breath and asks for water from Marcus and his husband. When they go to get a glass, she says she'd rather drink from a bowl, which should have set off a red flag for them. As if that weren't enough, the woman pulls a thorny branch out of her bag, and Marcus notices she stole one of his ribbons and wrapped it around the branch. Out of nowhere, she cuts herself with the thorns and asks for a cloth to stop the bleeding, prompting Marcus's husband to approach her. Suddenly, Gladys cuts off a lock of his hair hair and wraps it around the branch. At this point, Marcus should have punched this crazy woman in the face for attacking his husband, but no, he decides to keep watching the show. Gladys then rings a bell and somehow hypnotizes Marcus, stopping him from moving. She breaks the cursed branch and manages to control Marcus's body, forcing him to finish off his husband. Marcus spits out some dark, sinister goo and starts banging his head into Terry's until the guy passes out. After the massacre, Gladys takes Justine's hair lock and wraps it around the branch, breaking it again. This causes Marcus to sprint through the town until he finds Justine, leading to the events we saw earlier. In the final flashback, we understand what's really going on here. A few days before the kids disappeared, we see Alex being bullied by Matthew and the other boys. He's picked up by his dad after school, who quickly delivers some bad news to the kid. Aunt Gladys is really sick and is moving in with them. Alex asks how long she'll stay, and his dad says not long, since she's on the verge of death and could go any day now. He just didn't know she was a witch. The next day, Alex finds himself in a Home Alone movie since his dad forgot to pick him up from school. The kid has to walk home, and when he arrives, he sees his parents sitting in the living room, completely trance-like. Alex obviously realizes something's wrong with them and freaks out. That's when Aunt Gladys makes her dramatic entrance and says that Alex's parents are doing fine. Doesn't seem that way.
Are you okay?
Alex throws a glass of water in his dad's face, which pisses off Gladys, who then locks him in his room as punishment. The next day, the crazy aunt orders Alex not to tell anyone at school that she's living there and that his parents are looking like victims of a mass stroke. To show who's in charge, Gladys grabs the demonic branch and breaks it, causing Alex's parents to start poking themselves in the face. After the demonstration, Gladys puts the spell in the water bowl, which stops them from hurting themselves. With his hands tied, Alex promises not to tell anyone and heads off to school. When he gets home, Alex finds Gladys praying to an ugly tree from hell, from which she pulls the evil branches. She tells Alex he needs to feed his parents, which he tries to do, even though they're not cooperating. This is exactly the point in the plot I wanted to get to. Alex is the only one capable of beating this movie. Let's break down the facts. In the next scene, we see the kid going to the store alone and grabbing canned food for his parents. This means he has money to buy those items. Therefore, he could have walked down the medicine aisle and bought some sleeping pills. After that, all he would have had to do is grab a juicy bottle of orange juice and slip the pills in. Eventually, he could leave the bottle in the fridge and wait for his witchy aunt to drink from it. This would have allowed him to go full Dexter on her and tie up the crazy lady. Then he could have used his military ingenuity to extract information from her and find out how to break the spell on his parents. He could also have called Justine to tell her what was going on so she could inform the police, since no law officer would believe Alex's story. The key here is to immobilize Gladys and prevent her from getting to the witchcraft tree. Another thing Alex could have done is research the tree online, as there are plenty of shady websites that discuss these kinds of spells. Maybe there was a counter curse he could perform since he had all the ingredients right at hand. But forget that, because the kid decides to ignore my advice and wakes up at night to make a deal with Gladys. The woman is really sick and vomiting her guts out. She says she was hoping Alex's parents would heal her, suggesting that the witch feeds off people's life force to rejuvenate herself. Gladys says she needs fresher food and asks Alex to steal a personal item from each of his classmates. The kid asks if Gladys will leave their house if she gets better, and she guarantees she will. So we see Alex stealing his classmates' personal belongings. Then the hour of evil arrives as Gladys performs the ritual, summoning all the little ones to a dark party in the basement. One thing I really like about this movie is that the script doesn't leave any loose ends. If you're wondering how the FBI agents didn't notice that Alex's parents weren't exactly in good health, the answer comes when Gladys testifies at the police station and claims that Alex's dad can't answer questions because he recently had a stroke. What I can't believe is how stupid these cops are, just like Dumb and Dumber, because how did they not see the fork marks on the guy's face? Any freshly graduated medical examiner would have noticed that those were self-inflicted, meaning no one who had suffered a stroke would have done that. Given that, the FBI should have done their job and surrounded Alex's property to monitor the perimeter. Besides Alex being the only kid who hadn't disappeared, Gladys is a newcomer to Maybrook, a town with just over 3,000 people, which means the moment she shows up, the kids start disappearing. All of this is highly suspicious and can't just be a coincidence. So sooner or later, the agents would have noticed some slip up by Gladys and could have gotten a warrant to raid the property. But forget all that, because Gladys warns Alex that the FBI is going to investigate investigate the house. Because of this, she tells him to clean up the place and teaches him how to perform the ritual to control his school friends. The night before the police visit, Gladys orders the children to hide outside the house, which explains why the FBI didn't find anyone. At this point, I wonder, we see Gladys leave the house twice. The first time she goes to school to talk to Marcus, and the second time she goes to the principal's house to cast a spell on him. So Alex had enough time to grab a branch from the cursed tree and perform a spell to control his aunt, just like she taught him. He had plenty of her personal items right there in the room where she was sleeping. It would have been the simplest way to beat the movie, but I guess Alex wasn't the brightest student in school. Anyway, we see Alex coming home, where Paul and James are under the control of the crazy old witch. She tells Alex to pack his bag since the old lady needs to get out of town before more people show up to investigate. Gladys also warns the kid not to step on a line of salt placed between her room and the rest of the house. On the outside, Archie and Justine are analyzing the situation, unsure of what to do after seeing the police car parked on the street. In this case, they should have bought 2 guns at Walmart. They had already seen what Marcus was capable of. During this indecision, Justine sees Paul coming out of the house and waving for her to come in. Not realizing he's being controlled by Gladys, the dynamic duo stupidly walks right into the trap. To add the cherry on top, Justine steps on the line of salt on the floor in the living room, triggering Paul and James's killer mode as they both attack the intruders. No matter how much Archie hits James, the junkie just doesn't feel a thing and keeps attacking him until the two tumble into the basement where Archie sees the paralyzed kids. Meanwhile, Justine tests Paul's head resistance by hitting him with a frying pan, but the guy keeps trying to grab her. She even goes as far as using a vegetable grater on his face, which also doesn't work, other than giving him a nice shave. Not knowing what to do, Justine grabs Paul's gun and shoots him, but the guy barely reacts to the gunpowder's impact. It's only with the second shot that the cop goes down. Justine also helps Archie out and saves him by shooting James. The problem is, while Justine goes to take a breather in the kitchen, Archie sneaks down to the basement to look for Matthew. Unfortunately, what he finds is Gladys dropping a load in there. The woman lunges at his neck and rips off a chain, which she uses to perform the ritual and order him to send Justine packing. Meanwhile, we see Alex using his smarts to step on the salt line, which puts his parents on his tail. Desperate, Alex locks himself in the ritual room and decides to join the family business, as he wraps a lock of Gladys's wig hair around a branch and pricks his finger on a thorn to summon the army of kids in the basement to chase after the woman. Gladys has to run for her life as the 17 little devils chase her through the neighborhood. Since she hasn't been hitting the treadmill much, Gladys doesn't get far and is quickly taken down by the gang and literally torn apart. Once the witch goes to hell, the curse on the kids and Alex's parents is lifted, but not everything is sunshine and rainbows, as the spell leaves some lasting effects, and Gladys's victims don't fully recover right away. The narrator of the film says that a few kids started talking again after some time, but we don't really know if everyone's health got back to 100%. Weapons got rave reviews from both audiences and critics. This is definitely one of the best horror films of the year. I'm giving a shout out to director Zach Kreger because the way he tells the story from multiple characters' perspectives and in a non-linear fashion is the film's big win. It creates a dynamic that's fresh and unpredictable. The premise isn't exactly groundbreaking, but the actors really bring their A-game, especially Amy Madigan, who delivers a fantastic villain. Unfortunately, her performance will probably be overlooked by the Academy. The script is nearly flawless when it comes to plot holes, as it answers most questions, leaving only the characters' dreams unanswered. From what I've read, the movie originally had a larger subplot about Gladys that got cut during editing, and the director has said he'd love to make a prequel solely about her. Weapons isn't my favorite horror movie of 2025, but it's definitely up there. Given everything, I'd give the film an 8.5 out of 10. At the box office, the film more than made back its budget, costing just $38 million and raking in over $253 million. Guys, stick around till the end of the video to check out the playlist beating the 2025 horror releases. Without further ado, let's get to the kill count. In total, we got 5 kills, and of course the Golden Body Bag Award goes to Gladys, who got totally shredded. Don't forget to bless the like button. I see you on the next video, and bye!